We had already decided to divorce, the papers were on the kitchen table, and I was the one who put them there. I remember that Tuesday evening in November like it was last week. The apartment was quiet in that heavy, uncomfortable way that only happens when two people are deliberately not talking to each other. Lily was in her room playing with her blocks, and Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, and I was standing at the counter pretending to read something on mine. We were 3 feet apart and it felt like 3 miles. That was just our normal by then. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, I have a daughter named Lily who just turned 4, and 8 months ago my husband Daniel and I made the decision to end our marriage. And I want to be clear about something from the start, because people always assume the worst. There was no cheating. There was no addiction, no abuse, no dramatic betrayal. What happened to us was somehow harder to explain than any of those things, because at least those things give you someone to be angry at. What happened to us was just a slow disappearing. Like a fire that nobody fed until one day you walk into the room and there's nothing left but ash and the faint smell of what used to be there. It started, I think, around the time Lily was born. Which sounds terrible to say out loud, but it's the truth. Before her, Daniel and I were good together. Not perfect, but genuinely good. We laughed a lot. We had this habit of staying up way too late on weekends just talking, about nothing important, about everything, about stupid hypothetical questions and old memories and plans we were making. He used to reach for my hand in the car without even thinking about it. I used to save funny things I heard during the day to tell him when he got home. We were connected in this easy, natural way that I completely took for granted. And then Lily arrived, and everything we had quietly got buried under the exhaustion and the feeding schedules and the endless logistics of keeping a tiny human alive. And I kept waiting for us to come back up for air. I kept thinking, okay, when she sleeps through the night, when she starts daycare, when things calm down a little, we'll find each other again. But the months kept passing and Daniel kept getting quieter and I kept getting more frustrated with his quietness and he kept pulling back from my frustration and at some point we just stopped trying to close the distance. It became easier to just live parallel lives inside the same apartment. By the time Lily was 3, we were basically roommates who co-parented really well. We were polite. We were functional. We never fought in front of her, we never said cruel things to each other, we kept the surface of our life looking completely normal. But underneath that surface there was nothing. No warmth, no real conversation, no moments where I felt like he actually saw me. I used to catch him looking at me sometimes across the dinner table and I couldn't read his expression at all, and that scared me more than anything. I used to know every single thing that was going on behind his eyes. I was the one who finally said it out loud. One evening in March, after another dinner where we talked only about Lily's upcoming doctor appointment and whether we needed more coffee, I just sat down across from him and said, "Daniel, I think we need to stop pretending." And he looked at me for a long moment and then he nodded. Just nodded. And somehow that quiet nod hurt more than any argument we'd ever had, because it meant he had been thinking it too and neither of us had said anything. The months that followed were strangely calm. We told our families. We contacted a lawyer. We divided things carefully and without too much conflict, which people kept telling us was a good sign, a mature sign, and I kept smiling and agreeing while feeling completely hollow inside. We had decided to wait until after the holidays to finalize everything, to give Lily one last normal Christmas with both her parents in the same house. The papers were ready. The plan was set. And that Tuesday night in November was supposed to be just another quiet evening. Just another step toward the end. I put Lily to bed around 8. She had been a little off that day, quieter than usual, didn't finish her dinner, felt slightly warm when I kissed her goodnight. But kids run warm sometimes, and she had fallen asleep easily, so I didn't think too much of it. I went back to the kitchen, made tea I didn't really want, and sat alone at the table with the divorce papers sitting there in a folder right in front of me. Daniel went to bed before me. I stayed up a little longer, not doing anything in particular, just sitting in the silence of a life I was about to officially leave behind. I don't know exactly what time it was when I heard it. Late. Very late. The apartment was completely dark and I had just fallen asleep when something pulled me back, Not a sound I could immediately name, but something wrong, something that didn't belong in the normal nighttime quiet. And then I heard it clearly. Coming from Lily's room. Not crying. Something worse than crying. A strange, gasping, broken sound that stopped my heart completely before my brain even had time to process what it was. I was out of bed and in the hallway before I was fully awake. I pushed open Lily's door and what I saw made my legs go weak. She was lying in her bed, her small body rigid, her back slightly arched, and she was making that sound, that horrible broken gasping, and her eyes were half open but she wasn't looking at anything. She wasn't there. Her lips had a faint bluish tint in the dim light coming from her nightlight and her whole body was trembling in small, rapid shakes that I had never seen before and didn't understand and couldn't process. I screamed Daniel's name. I don't remember exactly how I screamed it. I just remember that the sound that came out of me didn't feel like my voice. It felt like something tearing. And then I was next to Lily's bed, reaching for her, not knowing what to do with my hands, not knowing whether to pick her up or leave her, not knowing anything, my mind completely blank with a terror so pure and physical that I couldn't form a single coherent thought. Daniel was in the doorway in seconds. He took one look at Lily and his entire face changed. Not into panic. Into something I hadn't seen on him in years. Focus. Complete, immediate, absolute focus. He crossed the room, gently moved me aside with one hand, and leaned over Lily without touching her, watching her carefully for about 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. She's having a febrile seizure, he said. His voice was calm. Not cold, not detached, calm in the way that a person is calm when they have decided that panic is not an option. Her fever spiked. It looks worse than it is. We need to time it and we need to call an ambulance right now. I just stared at him. Sarah. He looked at me directly. Call. Right now. Tell them she's 4 years old, she's having a seizure, give them our address. Can you do that? Something in his voice cut through the fog. I grabbed my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen, but I called, and I spoke, and somehow the words came out in the right order. While I was on the phone, Daniel was crouched next to Lily's bed, speaking to her in a low, steady voice even though she couldn't hear him, watching her breathing, watching the clock on his phone, making sure she was on her side, making sure she was safe. He had turned on the lamp. He had grabbed her blanket and folded it under her head. He was doing everything right while I was barely holding myself together on the phone with the dispatcher. The seizure lasted a little under 3 minutes. The ambulance arrived in 8. By the time the paramedics came through the door, Lily's body had relaxed, she had stopped trembling, and she was crying, really crying, confused and scared and reaching for me, and I have never in my life been so grateful to hear my daughter cry. The paramedics were wonderful. They checked her over carefully, explained what a febrile seizure was, explained that it happens when a fever rises too fast, explained that it is terrifying to witness but in most cases does not cause harm. They said she needed to go to the hospital to be checked and monitored, and Daniel and I both said yes at exactly the same moment without looking at each other. We rode in the ambulance together. I sat next to Lily and held her hand and she fell asleep against my arm before we even arrived. Daniel sat across from us, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching her breathe. Just watching her breathe. And I watched him watching her, and something happened in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. We were at the hospital for most of the night. Lily was examined, monitored, given medication to bring her fever down. The doctors confirmed it was a febrile seizure, confirmed she was going to be completely fine, and told us we could take her home in the morning. We sat in those hard plastic hospital chairs on either side of her small bed, and at some point, I don't know when exactly, Daniel reached across Lily's sleeping body and put his hand over mine. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I just turned my hand over and held his. We sat like that for a long time. Around 4 in the morning, when Lily was deeply asleep and the ward was quiet, Daniel looked at me and said, very quietly, "I've been so afraid of losing her that I forgot I was already losing you." I looked at him. "I didn't know how to be what you needed," he said. After Lily came, I felt like I was failing at everything all the time and I didn't know how to talk about it, so I just went quiet. And the quieter I got, the further away you felt, and I didn't know how to come back. I wanted to. Sarah, I wanted to so many times. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not in a painful way. In the way that something cracks open when it finally gets air. Why didn't you just say that? I asked. My voice came out much smaller than I intended. Because I didn't know how, he said. I still don't really know how. But I'm saying it now. We didn't make any big declarations that night. We didn't promise each other that everything was going to be perfect. We were both too exhausted and too raw for anything that dramatic. But somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning, sitting in a hospital with our daughter sleeping between us, we started talking. Really talking. In the way we used to stay up late and talk when we were young and in love and had no idea how hard life was going to get. We took Lily home the next morning. She was tired but already more herself, already asking for her blocks and her favorite cartoon. I made her toast and sat with her on the couch, and Daniel made coffee and brought me a cup without asking, and when he handed it to me our fingers touched around the mug and neither of us pulled away. The divorce papers are still in that folder on the kitchen table. But last night Daniel moved them to the drawer. And I watched him do it, and neither of us said a word, and somehow that said everything.